Don't just live for tomorrow, or just live in yesterday. Just be glad for all you have that's in today. And though you've come through many obstacles.
Hey everyone, Connie here, and welcome to my blind reaction to Castlevania Season 4, Episode 3. So, last episode we got the arrival of a new character named Zamfir. She seems to be this kind of warrior or something working for Targavishte. As part of this, like, I think it was like some kind of underground army or something like that. Fighting back against the forces of evil that are plaguing things. We get a little look into Carmilla as well. Her and her plans and everything with her quote-unquote sisters. Kind of just seeing how things are going there, how I can never remember I always get his name mixed up with the other one. And then I can never remember the names in the first place. One of them is Isaac, and I don't remember which one is Isaac. I think Isaac is the one we haven't seen yet this season. But either way, the one guy who's with Lenore in Carmilla's castle, he's kind of living it up, really. And he and Lenore seem to actually be on really good terms with each other, which not quite the vibe the end of last season was giving, but okay, sure. The other two sisters are away doing something at the moment, but Carmilla is making her plans for total domination. And yeah, we see that things are progressing. Alucard still hasn't had like a massive role to play quite yet. And I don't know how and when he will reunite with Trevor and Sypha, but we'll have to see. Because right now, it's not quite clear. There are two other new vampires, though. One of whom I guess was supposedly in Dracula's armies or something before. I don't remember if it said that in the episode or if I just heard that somewhere. Because I had heard like maybe two things about this series since last week. Just randomly seeing them on Twitter, and it's like just extremely random. One was I just saw like Death, basically. I saw the design for Death, who has already been foreshadowed for this season, so. But the other one was like something about him, and I don't remember if it was already mentioned or not, so. But I believe it might have been about that. Either way. I'm not 100% sure. It's hard to remember sometimes. But yeah. It was either said in last episode or it was what I saw, that he used to like be in Dracula's army or something. But it's like, I don't think I remember him like at all. Like, there were multiple members of Dracula's army shown, but I don't think I remember him being one of them. And then there's the other guy as well, who I don't know much of anything about at all. They didn't really delve too much into him, so we'll see how they go. I'm interested, though. Because right now it seems like Trevor and Sypha's entire storyline isn't really converging with Carmilla's yet. Alucard's hasn't really done anything yet. And again, we haven't seen the other guy who, again, I think is Isaac. I don't know. I always get the names mixed up, and then when I watch and they say and their names are said, it's like, oh yeah, duh, obviously. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm shit with names like that. But either way, we haven't even seen him this season yet. I mean, it's only been 2 episodes before now, but still. So I don't know what role he's gonna have to play. Because really, the two big enemies we have right now are Carmilla's group and these two rogue vampires. But there's also all these people around who are all these like minor vampires and monsters and people and stuff who are trying to resurrect Dracula. Who knows if they're going to have any real relevance or if they're connected to one of the other main antagonists. And then, of course, death was foreshadowed to be in this, so who knows how that's going to come into play. It's just like, I'm just wondering how they're going to close all this out and do it in a satisfying enough way to where it doesn't feel rushed. It feels like there's just a lot of things to cover still. I don't know. But with there being a sequel series in the works, maybe I think I said this before, but maybe not everything will be resolved. Maybe some of the stuff will have to be resolved in the sequel. I think I heard that Richter is going to be the main character in the sequel, the Belmont, but I'm not 100% certain about that because I heard the information like once and haven't bothered like seeing anything about it again. So we'll have to see. But I am interested. I am definitely interested. So let's just get this started. Let's see what happens in this episode, and let's just hope for the best that they'll at least work to get all these endings, all these threads kind of weave together to make a satisfying closure to this series. So yeah, when the screen fades to black, pause this redirect and go to the description below. Follow the link to the reaction, and after you watch it, come back here to the redirect and resume play. Because after it fades to black and then fades back in, everything from that point forward will be my afterthoughts and will contain spoilers to the episode. So, with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you at the reaction. And we are back, and we'll begin with spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. I promise you that I will never stop mixing up and forgetting Hector and Isaac's names. I mean, it's not gonna happen. I'm gonna keep forgetting them. I'm gonna keep mixing them up. It sucks. I don't know why, but it's just like they never click with me like other characters do. Like Alucard is easy to remember. Sypha and Trevor, easy to remember. For some reason, even though we only had seen her in one episode prior, Zamfir is easy to remember. But Isaac and Hector, I'd say it's because they're just so ordinary sounding names, but I mean, Trevor kind of is too. But maybe it's because Trevor's the main character that his is a little easier to remember. But Hector and Isaac, they're just so ordinary, just normal names compared to a lot of these, like Morana and Striga. And some of these names are very possibly normal in other countries, in Europe and whatnot. I'm just saying, for me personally, as an American, these aren't names that I hear, like, during just my life. I've met plenty of Isaacs, plenty of Hectors, but I've never met a Morana. I've never met a Striga. And I don't know why I remember Zamfir, even though I've never met a Zamfir. I don't know. I can't explain it. But this episode easily can just be described with the word nuance. Because there's 3 sections to this episode. The last one being excessively short. Just blatantly it is. But all 3 do to some degree focus on the nuance of either the characters involved, the situation at hand, or both. So let's start. Actually, I think all three could kind of count as both. Maybe. But let's start from the beginning. So our first section of this episode focuses on Isaac, who this is our first time seeing him in this season. Isaac is rebuilding the city that he liberated from the warlock last season. And in this episode, we have one of his minions, the night creature that can speak, the fly dude. I don't know if he actually has a name. If so, I definitely don't remember or know it. But he goes to Isaac and asks him, why are we doing this? Why are you having us do this? We are night creatures. We crave and find pleasure in destruction and death and decomposition. You're having us rebuild, bury the dead, put little dolls and stuff on their gravestones in tribute. Why are we doing this? Why are you having us go against our nature? And Isaac's response is basically like, why does that have to be your nature? Can't your nature be fluid? Can't you do something else besides what you've always known? And here, have a berry. But it's like really interesting because it definitely mirrors his own life. His history was slavery and then kind of just working in servitude to Dracula after. But now, as he kind of puts it, now he sees himself as the one, as the hand, rather than the tool being held. He sees himself as having agency in his actions. And it's a really important thing. Because, I mean, like, outside of the context of this series, and even outside of the context of his character and all, this is a thing that a lot of people go through. Finding agency in their lives. Finding the ability to live for themselves. And do the things that makes them the happiest. And makes them feel right about their life. A lot of people go through this. And a lot of times, this is so important to people who have been discriminated against. Whether for their race, their sexuality, their gender, so on and so forth. Finding that agency, being able to live for yourself and not live in the ways that you're basically raised into believing or taught or told that you have to live like, is a big deal. I mean, just when a trans person comes out, for example, living with the agency of themselves, getting to be themselves for once, rather than being who they were basically raised to believe that they are. It's so freeing. And we see that parallel with Isaac here for sure. Again, he lived kind of his whole life in servitude in some way. Even if he believed that his servitude to Dracula was by his choice, it was still serving someone. And it still didn't bring him the joy and freedom that he needed. And again, as I said in the reaction, Isaac isn't like a perfect good person. But that's the point. He's nuanced. He has good and bad in him. And we see a lot of that throughout this series. We see the bad things he does, but we also see the good in him as well. And this episode shows like the wonderfully good in him, the respectfulness he has. and it really makes us excited to see what comes next. And he's contacted via his mirror by Varney, one of the two vampires who we saw before, and a member of Dracula's original army. Varney wants Isaac to work with him in his goal of resurrecting Dracula. And Isaac's just like, nah, I'm doing my own thing right now. Maybe we can talk after, but your plans, they don't matter to me at the moment. And this continues to go into that line of Isaac finding his agency and his own way amongst everything. He's not, he at this time does not want to actively work for or with someone in their goals. He does not want to be a pawn in their mission. And we do get to see a bit of that later on as well, which I'll get to when talking about the next section of this episode. But it's really cool to see how this is a natural progression of what we had seen already. Like, of course, Varney's trying to resurrect Dracula. We know Isaac has been was Dracula's favorite Forge Master. We know this. We know that Isaac even had a great admiration for Dracula, and that he has hated humanity. So it makes sense. Varney wants to resurrect Dracula. Call in Isaac. But it also makes sense. It also is a follow through, a pretty good follow through to see Isaac say no. Because just again, seeing all this talk about his agency and everything prior to this, it would make no sense if he said yes there. It would just kind of contradict itself in the writing. So I really like that they did that. So let's get into the second act of this episode. Striga and Marana. Striga and Marana are two characters I have been exceptionally interested in. And I feel like the series up to now has not really given enough focus to them. See, in season 3, Carmilla and Lenore were given a lot of notable focus. Both of them were made into these very interesting characters, but Striga and Marana kind of suffered. They just weren't delved into as much. And it kind of sucks because I am very much interested in them, and not just because they're lesbians. I'm very much interested in them because they're interesting. You have one who is a just world-renowned level warrior. She has the skill in battle of, like, I don't know, to make a, I guess, comparable example, maybe Alexander the Great. Something like that. She's a world-class fighter. She knows war strategy and everything. And then her partner is pure strategy. And not a warrior at all, but a strategist, a bookworm, if you will, an intellect, an intellectual, rather, is the term. And oftentimes, in a lot of media and everything, these two sides are kind of portrayed as at odds. The big, brutish warrior types and the small, bookish, scholarly types. They're presented at odds. It's kind of the entire jock versus nerd thing. But there are some cases out there where writers, comic artists, people who work on these animated shows or whatever, even live action shows and movies and all, there are some occasions where they take this concept and make these two friends or even more. And I always love it when they do, because although I'm not a huge believer of the idea of opposites attract, because honestly, most of the time that's not true. And it can actually be very damaging and lead into very toxic relationships. Um, I like the idea of still connecting those specific two archetypes together. And especially when you can make their relationship believable. And in this way, of course, like Marana is a strategist, so of course she would have some input on working with war. And Striga is a warrior, so and she does know war strategy herself, so they could connect in that regard. So it's just interesting, and there's a lot that could be done with these characters, but they're starting to do that here, and I just wish it had happened a little more last season too. So here we see that they're talking, and Marana is not happy about where they're at. She admits that she has no love for humans. She has no issue with killing them. That's not the problem. But the problem is she doesn't really feel fulfilled fighting Carmilla's battle here. She finds no fulfillment in it, and she feels like that it's just going around and around in a circle, doing the same thing over and over and over. And she seems to be just getting bored of it. But not only bored, but finding nothing about it to truly matter to her. She wants something more. And Striga at first is against this. At first she's like, I don't see your point. And she's even like trying to convince her, like, no, this is kind of what we do. This is a battle. There's going to be a lot of casualties. There's going to be a lot of issues. It's going to be long and arduous. And Marana's like, that's the point. I don't want it to be long and arduous. But then they end up getting attacked. So while Marana hides in a coffin, Striga puts on this day armor, which the design of is utterly fantastic, and goes out to fight them. And she does. She goes out, she fights the invading people, kills them pretty handedly and one-sidedly, but notices something. When she comes back in to see Marana again, she tells her, these weren't warriors. These weren't soldiers or fighters. These were farmers. Normal people. Defending their land. Defending their families. And you can see Striga is struggling to understand. She is struggling to find purpose in a battle where they're fighting these normal everyday people rather than actual warriors. She's struggling to find a reason, really, that they would have to just randomly go about and kill these kinds of people. And we see that she starts to see Marana's point. And it's right at that time when Carmilla calls, and it's like, oh, Hector finished his hammer. You guys can come back now. We're ready to move on. And it's like, it's very clear that Marana and Striga are not fully on Carmilla's side anymore. They definitely feel unfulfilled and like they just don't want to do this anymore. They want to find something else to do with their lives, with each other. And this goes back into the entire nuance angle that this episode really, really pushes forward. These characters are not just these avatars of destruction and death. They're thinking people who struggle with things and question things. and just don't see all of their actions as something fully necessary and right to do. They want to they want to find purpose, and they're starting to look at their lives in a different way than they had before. And then you have the third section of this episode, which is very short but focuses on Trevor and Sypha getting to look around Targovishte and kind of just talk briefly with Zamfir about them all working together. Zamfir wants to make sure they can be trusted, and they want to make sure she can be trusted. So they're going to take a look around Targovishte first to get a grasp of the situation. But from what we saw, everyone's in turmoil. There are dead people littering the streets. There's sick and just hungry people everywhere. There's even kids forced to try and trap rats just to be able to eat. It's a hellscape. And it's remained a hellscape ever since Dracula destroyed it, all these years later. And it goes into the nuance of should these people suffer for the actions of those in the past? Should these people be in this kind of situation because of what their ancestors did to Dracula? And honestly, I would say no. Because even if it was within a time frame to where there are people living who were at Targovishte in that day, which actually I think there would have to be, right? Because wasn't the priest in season 1 like in the current day, and he was at Targovishte during that? Yeah, now I think about it, I think it's only been like what, a couple decades. Now that I actually stop and think about it, yeah, I don't think it's been as long as I thought. Been like maybe 2-3 decades, but either way, even the people who were there, it's like a lot of them were being misled by the church. And I've said it before, but even in real life during these kinds of times, the churches, especially in Europe, were terrible, absolutely horrible. And there's a lot of churches nowadays that are absolutely horrible, but like the kinds of stuff that you would see them do in this series are the kinds of shit they would do, minus obviously the literal hell demons running amok. But you get the idea. They would burn people at the stake for suspected witchcraft. We all know about the Salem witch trials. We all know about all that kind of shit. And this was not only legal, but encouraged by the state, by the church. It was an active part of our history where the people doing these absolutely atrocious, horrible things not only believed they were in the right, but actively taught people that it was right. And they lured people into that idea. They purposefully misled people for the sake of spreading that horrible ideology. And it's absolutely fucked up. And the people who were misled this way and who are still misled this way, I don't think are truly bad people. There are some exceptions, but a lot of these people, again, going with the concept of nuance here, are people who can be led back into doing the right things and just being in the right and everything. They only are there because they're led to be there. It's the people leading them who are the true evil ones. And I want to make it very clear here. While nuance is very strong in our world, it's like there are cases where it's not as well. There are cases where it is just strictly black and white, where there is just strictly good and evil people and stuff and situations. There are some things that you cannot say are nuanced. You just cannot. Well, I mean, technically you can try to, but you're going to be just blatantly wrong. You cannot say there's nuance in Nazis, for example. Nazis are evil. There is no ifs, ands, or buts, no questions, no debates. So on and so forth, stuff like that. But a lot of things are, and this is one of those situations and cases where things are. People misled to believe this stuff can very much change. I was one of them. I was misled in a lot of ways to believe a lot of things that are horrible. But I've changed and realized I was wrong and worked to fix that. I've broken out of that brainwashing, you could basically call it. And no matter what, no one deserves this kind of shit. The kind of shit we see in this episode these people are suffering through, no one deserves that. That's just not okay. Even the worst of the worst, it's like, unless you are like a Nazi or something, you don't deserve that. Like those are the only kinds of people who deserve shit like that. But again, these people don't. The horrific state Targovishte is in, it's not good. And we can see that Zamfir truly wants to help them. Like, we can see how excited she is about Trevor and Sypha being there. And she's talking about, like, wanting to make sure she can trust them, but you can see she is excited. She is actually hype. She is hyped that they're there to possibly help them. And I think it's truly because she does want to help these people. And you know Trevor and Sypha do. But they have to check in on things too. They've walked into too many traps. They've been in way too many horrible situations, especially in the weeks since the events of season 4. And the events of season 4 in general as well. Or season 3, rather. So they have to make sure that they can trust this, that this is real. And if they truly come to a belief that it is, and that these people just need their help, then they will. You know they will. And I like that this episode goes so heavily into this theme of nuance, of things not being so black and white with these characters and situations. And I really want to see this continue in this season, especially with the fact that we do blatantly have characters in this season alone and in this series alone who are black and whites, who are not nuanced. Carmilla, for example, she's straight up evil. Like, yeah, you kind of feel bad about what happened to her, but at the same time, her actions, her beliefs, her ideologies are straight up evil. Undeniably. She is undeniably bad. And on the other hand, honestly, you could say that Alucard is the undeniably good one. Yeah, not Trevor or Sypha. Sypha in maybe seasons 1 or 2 you could say that about, but not anymore, honestly. I believe Sypha has kind of become more gray area along with Trevor. Trevor was always in the gray area. But Alucard was always a good guy. And I mean a really good guy. Like, yeah, he's a vampire. Yeah, he's kind of sassy at times, but he's never had really a negative, bad aspect to him that, like, was any kind of, like, just outside of regular, like, nature for a person. He definitely takes after his mother almost entirely rather than his father, and his father was definitely a lot more nuanced. But Alucard was very much is very much still, even with killing those two at the end of season 3, that was in self-defense and everything. So you can't even blame him for that. And he hated doing it because he loved them. Alucard is definitely the one character in this who I would say is undeniably good. And Carmilla is the one who I would say is undeniably bad. And maybe you could, I guess, count Varney as undeniably bad too, and maybe his partner, though I don't know enough about them yet to actually say for sure. I really don't. But like most of the characters in this are nuanced, are very gray area, and that's great. That's good. And this episode goes heavy into that theming, while also making us not forget that there are characters in this who are more one side or the other. I mean, while Alucard isn't shown in this, Carmilla is, and Carmilla's talked about quite a bit in it. So I'm just wondering where they're going to take all of this. How they're going to delve into these ideas with these characters going forward. What are they going to do with Isaac now that he's begun to change? What are they going to do with Striga and Marana now that they've begun to question their place in Carmilla's war? And what are they going to do with Trevor and Sypha and Zamfir in fighting for the people of Targovishte? There's a lot of questions and not a lot of episodes. As I keep saying, it's like we've only got 10 episodes with this season. That's not a lot of time to work with things. There's a lot to still cover, and it's like, I feel like they're just adding more and more. I don't know where this is going to go. But I'm very much interested. This was a really damn good episode. And it's definitely made me like Isaac more, and I already did like Isaac. But it's like made me like him more. It's made me like Striga and Marana more. And it's made me even more interested in the events happening in Targovishte and where that's going to go. So, hopefully, with the rest of the episodes we have this season, we get again, as I talked about before, a satisfying conclusion. And even if everything isn't fully resolved, and some of that will carry over into the sequel series, hopefully the stuff that really needs to be resolved is. Like, I'm sure Carmilla is going to die by the end of the season. I'm very sure of that one. But there's a lot that I'm not sure of. So I'm interested. But tell me in the comments below what you thought of this episode of Castlevania. And thank you so much for tuning in. For now, I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.